Welcome everyone to episode 2 of the GeekySteveD show. I guess I'm going to have to stop saying the numbers because eventually these are going to get up pretty high and it's going to get a little ridiculous. Can you imagine me going, this is episode 395, this is episode 2000, because honestly I don't plan to stop this show anytime soon. So today is National Science Fiction Day, so everyone out there, happy National Science Fiction Day. Definitely go out, watch some movies, TV shows, watch something, enjoy yourself. Science fiction has been, a big part of my life. It's pretty much been a part of everyone's lives, especially in the last 20 or 30 years. I feel that science fiction has basically become the standard of what we think of in pop culture, especially if you're anybody that's under 40. Between all the Marvel movies, Star Wars, that's debatable if you consider that fantasy or science fiction, but it's close, and everything else kind of in between. Every major TV show or movie now that's kind of geared towards 40 and under is science fiction based. Also, we live in basically a science fiction world. I mean, who would have thought that we would have cell phones that can call us cabs, order us food, be able to make podcasts like I am doing on my phone right now. It just shows that everything is out there now. There's nothing stopping anyone from doing anything. It's a fascinating journey, and with that, I have to go off and talk about something that I think needs to be addressed in terms of reboots, and that is, where's my Cops reboot? Does anyone remember Cops? Cops was a cartoon in the early 90s. It was the tagline of fighting crime in a future time. Basically, it was, like set in like 2050, kind of thing. There was like lasers. The head of the chief of police, or I don't know what he was. He was some kind of, he was getting something case. It was like bulletproof case, but it was like BP vest. So it was like bulletproof vest, and he was like a cyborg, and it was an awesome show. It was like a cops and robbers show, but set in the future. At one time, it was also called Cyber Cops, so someone might remember it as that as well. It aired, I think, on CBS for a little bit in the morning, and then it was syndicated a lot. And about 5-6 years ago, Cookie Jar had the complete series come out in a 2-volume set. So I rewatched it back then, and it's a great show. And it's one of those shows that honestly needs a reboot. It could work, a cartoon, a comic book, and then maybe even a movie in the future. I mean, everything else is getting reboots. Now, I know that pretty much everything that's getting a reboot nowadays is basically something that is very, fondly remembered from people's childhoods. My Little Pony, Transformers, He-Man's got 2 shows in the working on Netflix, She-Ra's back. There's a lot. Let's just put it that way. But where's Cops? Cops should be back. That's plain and simple. Imagine a futuristic version of today. So it's set like 50 years in the future from today. So let's say it's 2070, and there's like sophisticated super cell phones and drones, and you can kind of have like transforming people and things, and spy cameras and all this stuff. And it could be like, you can maybe make it a little more realistic in some ways, because if you notice, a lot of the reboots, they either gear towards kids again, like the Ninja Turtles reboots that have happened in the last couple of years with the CG cartoon and then Rise of the Ninja Turtles now, or it could be, which then you could kind of don't want it to be realistic, or you could do the more realistic version and just gear it straight to 20, 30-year-olds. And, because that's a big thing, especially if it was to be a comic book. There's so many comic books now for properties like Mask and Rom Space Knight and things like that would just be perfect for, to make a Cops thing out of. And I believe the Cops is owned by Hasbro, which means they could do, a lot of those things are owned by, like Hasbro owns G.I. Joe, Transformers. I think they own Mask. Actually, I don't know if they own ROM Space Knight, but I think they're involved in it or something, at least on the comic front. So honestly, that's something that they need to do. That's something that just needs to happen. I'm sorry. Like, I don't know. I mean, I want to spearhead it. Anyone out there that's listening that can get this done for me, get me in touch with somebody from Hasbro. I want to make a comic book. Let's do a 6-issue miniseries. Let's do something unique and fun with it, and we can kind of play with the characters and have some fun with it. Because it's a dead property, which is unfortunate. The sad part is now you would think with all the streaming services and everything we have, it'd be a lot easier to get certain things online, and it is for a lot of things. But at the same time, it's not. There's still a lot of TV shows, even from when I was a kid, that you can get the DVDs, but streaming kind of opens it up to everyone out there, because maybe they'll go back and watch it now, whereas DVDs are only catered to people that already know the show. But if you put episodes on streaming, now someone might just want to watch it just to remember it, and they might like it, and then they'll remember it. Maybe their kids will watch it, and then they grow up with it. And that's how Ninja Turtles have worked, because it's kind of spanned generations, and Transformers as well. Because what they do is they they go through generations. Your kids grow up watching it, then you're an adult, and then you kind of still want to watch it, and they make like the reboots or something that's kind of like geared towards adults, or like nostalgia. Because if you think like Ninja Turtles had the TMNT movie, the CG one, that was a sequel to the original movies. And then you had all the video games come back, like there was Turtles in Time reshelled for the Xbox. And then there was a bunch of other, like a lot of re-releases of the old games. And then they made a new CG cartoon series for kids. And then they had the 2003 series as well, which actually was a lot more like the comic, and it was a little darker. That's a pretty good show. That's something that everyone should really actually watch. But basically, if you would just take all of those ideas and then just, imagine that it kind of allows people to grow up with it, and then they pass it on to their kids, because they're like, oh, hey, this is what I watched as a kid. Here's the new version for you kids, which is updated because kids are different now than they were in the 90s. Kids are different now than they were in the 2003 series. And so you can kind of grow up with the times, and it's kind of a cool concept. And also you can do crossovers and things like that. The 2003 series did a crossover with the original series, and I think it also had the original comic book series in it for like a second. I believe it was called Turtles Forever. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. There's nothing that could be used as more of a blueprint than the Ninja Turtle series for how to keep a TV show or some kind of a property open for onward. And especially if you just do it right, it's got to adapt with the times. And something like Cops would be perfect for it, because you could do some fun stuff with it, futuristic stuff. Imagine, one of my favorite shows is Almost Human, the Carl Urban-driven science fiction show from about 2011, I think. Basically, it was a future where he was a cop, he has a cybernetic leg, and his partner is a cyborg or a robot. And, they're stopping crime. And that show ended as well. And that's a show that just ended after one season with cliffhangers and things they never got to explore. And, it sucks. The Facebook page every now and then will post updates about people and stuff from the show, but there's nothing ever going on with it. And it's just, sometimes if they just would let it go, it could work. And Cops is just one of those things that I've thought about for a long time. And if I could just get in touch with somebody over there, I would do it. I'll do it. Like, someone just get me in touch with them. Someone send me something. I'll talk to them. We'll figure something out. Look, we can do a 6-issue miniseries. That wouldn't break anybody's bank. Maybe we can get something started. Maybe we can sell some more DVDs of the original show. Heck, why not? Let's just do it. I could just imagine drones and people with like helicopters, and you could have like people that are hacking people and turning down. I can't remember the name of the city in that show, but basically you could have it do something like there's a hacker and he shuts down the city, and everything stops working. I mean, because think about it now, everything's electronic. You could even have it in the future. Everyone's using like electronic money, not even a card, but like almost like their phone, like an Apple Pay. And it shuts down, so like everything's going crazy. It's like gridlock on a large scale, and they got to track this dude down. I mean, there's so many ways you could take this now with technology and just drones, and you could have spaceships, and you could have like people that live on a space station. There's all kinds of fun stuff. Like this show is so cool. The characters were very interesting. The one guy had a police dog who was a robot, and it had a siren on it, and it was just fun. And the bosses were like crime bosses, like kind of typical mafia bosses, which still kind of works. You can add other people to it. There was the creepy, oh my gosh, it was a doctor. It was an evil doctor, and you could see her brain in her head. It was real weird, and you could play with all that stuff. And it's just, there's a lot of things that need to come back, and that's just one of the things. I mean, especially something like comic books, which is the big thing. I think comic books have the power to bring something back without it having to cost $1 million to do so. I mean, comic books don't sell a lot, especially compared to what they used to, especially if it's not Marvel or DC Comics. But it has the opportunity to allow you to do things that you would like to do as a cartoon or a movie, but you don't have a budget. But it could still be entertaining and fascinating because the art can substitute for the big budget CG. And that's, something that comic books have embraced for a long time, really. I mean, we do have a lot of like Alien and Predator movies, for instance, but there's way more comic books. There's Godzilla comic books. It's not easy to make a Godzilla movie, whether it was the guy in the suit, which are honestly my favorite ones, just because they're fun. And just imagine me, not with my broken leg right now, but me in a suit just kicking over fake buildings and smashing cars and like throwing them and just being crazy, But in a comic book, you can do that all the time. You can make stories forever, and then you still have your movies. It's a great way to supplement and also be its own thing at the same time. And that's why almost every action movie, especially like in the 90s and in the early 2000s, had comic book adaptations. Or something like Mars Attacks. It had one movie, one of my favorite movies of all time, but it has billions of comics. And they've brought it back. Mars Attacks, Transformers, Ghostbusters. I think it did He-Man or something recently. Like crazy, outrageous things that could never really happen in a comic book. There's a lot of moving parts that would have to happen in a movie for that to happen, but they can happen in a comic book. And that's what I love about comics is you can get some crazy stories, whether they're based off of a property, like a Cops comic could be, which Cops was a comic book. I think it was about 13 issues back in the day, and it was a little more serious. It had a handgun in the logo of Cops, which would never, ever fly. Never, ever fly now. But, unless it was geared towards adults. But, still, even that had its own thing. I mean, and that's what's great about comic books. And that's why I think like a Cops comic would be a great way to start, and also test the waters, see what people think, get some eyeballs, get some people to just remember that it exists, to be honest. It's just something that I hate. That's what's always been great about Transformers. The Transformers community has been very fortunate that they've always had ongoing comic books. Now, sometimes, they've not been the greatest, but, the last 5 or 6 years, the community's really enjoyed the books, but at least they always have an ongoing story. The movie stopped, which the movies, let's just be honest, a lot of people don't like them. Michael Bay explosions everywhere, but there's good stuff in them, but there's bad stuff in them. The comics, same way, but they're always ongoing. There's always something new. There's something new to the lore of Transformers. G.I. Joe's been a lot like that recently, too, in the last 10 years, where you've had just constant G.I. Joe comics. I mean, there's now a comic that is actually a continuation of the original Marvel comic. And then you have other ones, too. So, I mean, there's a little bit for everyone, and they can always have something going. And that's what I've always liked about those communities, that there's always something you can find. I mean, there's even special comics from conventions for, like, Transformers. There's even these little things like that. And that's what's been cool about that. But it sucks. There's a lot of other, like, little toy properties and things from that time period that have just kind of disappeared. They weren't the biggest back then, but they still had something that would work, or something that could work in the future. And all it takes is a good reboot, honestly. And I like original properties, but I also like reboots. I don't have any problem with both, as long as there's an equal amount of both. I don't want too many look, too many originals. There's no such thing, but there can be definitely a problem with too many reboots. But if a reboot's done right, it can work perfectly. Or a continuation. I mean, there's nothing even stopping Cops from just being in the future from the Cops series, and then so just a sequel to Cops, which would just be great too. There's a lot of things you could do with it. I just want everyone to be aware of it. I'm going to have to start bringing it up all the time to everybody. Anytime someone starts talking about things, I'm just going to be like, oh yeah, how was your day? Oh, did you ever watch Cops, the cartoon? It was the greatest show ever. I'm just going to start bringing it up to people so that maybe I can bring back awareness myself. Because honestly, that's just a show that I miss. I mean, thankfully there was it was like 40, 50 episodes. So, I mean, at least there's a bunch of episodes, but man, there's so much cool stuff you could do with that thing. It's just now, it's just kind of been, overshadowed by a lot of other properties from that time period, but could easily come back as something like a comic book and see what happens. And then re-release the original comic too in like a box set, like a graphic novel, because I think it'd be like 2 graphic novels. Or they could do like a big omnibus compendium type deal. That's what I want. What does everyone else out there want? Is there anything else that you guys want to see back? What about Cops? Do you remember anything about Cops? Is there anything that you thought was awesome? I mean, come on. The leader, BP Vess, had a cannon in his chest. He'd open up his cannon. He very rarely did it. That was when you knew it was a big deal. He'd open his chest and a giant cannon would shoot out. Fun show. And then probably the biggest news so far this year is Y2K20. And by that, I mean WWE Y2K20. So for anyone out there who hasn't heard, if you try to play WWE 2K20 on the Xbox and PS4, it will not work in the year 2020. Yes, you heard me right. There is a glitch in the system, or I don't know. Someone made a Y2K bug that basically once it changed to 2K to 20, the game would no longer work. And now, I think in PlayStation, you can actually go back and change your date like manually to get it to 2019. It'll work, but that's just stupid. And I've heard some people say that you can do it in the Xbox now. I don't know, but it shouldn't even have to happen. This game has been the biggest dumpster fire for a major game in a long time. Like 2K has had 2 games last year now. 2K has had 2 games, WWE 2K20 and NBA 2K20, or 19, whatever year they call theirs. It always seems like it's a year different, and it's confusing. So, both games have had a ton of issues. The only problem is WWE's is on gameplay. NBA's isn't on gameplay. At least you can play the game. I mean, if you're not playing like by player, if you're just playing the game, if you want to play your franchise type modes or just play online against somebody, no issues really there. Theirs is more the microtransactions, all the BS with with making your character and all that, and having to basically it's pay to play, pay to be good, or pay to have a decent player. Hashtag pay to be a decent player on 2K. Which is, and there's like mini games and like slot machines, like you're gambling inside of a gambling mechanic, and which has just been nonsense. But WWE 2K hasn't even been playable. People glitch in the ring, they fall through the ropes. When you sometimes edit characters, the clothing won't even stand on their head; it'll be like hovering above them. There's one video of Becky Lynch; her eyeballs are like jutting out of her head. She looks like she's nightmare fuel, basically nightmare fuel Becky Lynch. That should have been one of those DLC from those like Wasteland DLCs they've been doing recently, which is the one thing that really sucks about those WWE 2K games this year, is they get these cool fictional DLCs that I think are really cool, something different and unique, and then the game's trash, and they change the gameplay. They changed how you do finishers and all this stuff for no reason whatsoever. It wasn't like they didn't change the gameplay as much as they just changed the actual button layout. which was just idiotic because the button layout really isn't that bad. That's like the farthest problem from that game. The problem with the game is always this kind of been the game's a lot similar every year, but I felt like the mechanics, like, you know, they finally started to fix the reversal system. You should be able to reverse every move, you know. That's ridiculous. No wrestling game is like that. It'd be like if Tekken, you could reverse every move every time. It made it too easy to do it, and it got complicated. Then you had to do a lot of running around to kind of like manipulate things. And you cheat to use certain moves because certain moves were harder to block. It's just ridiculous. But now they changed the gameplay controls. They screwed up the graphics with weird Nightmare Fuel type creepy crap. There's glitches where like the game just doesn't load or things don't work properly, or you get stuck in the ring ropes. People like hover. I've seen the videos just people like standing there, and then on top of that, now you can't even play the game. I guess that was their way of fixing the game. Is like, look, we can't fix it, so we just don't want anybody to play it. And that's sad. Honestly, that's probably one of the saddest things about the 2K series. I love wrestling. This is now my second episode. I've talked about wrestling again. And wrestling's, you know, I've always loved it. The wrestling games have always been great. My suggestion to anyone out there who wants to play like a modern wrestling game is just play Fire Pro Wrestling World. That's it. Everyone should just play Fire Pro Wrestling World. You can play 2K19. That's a good one too. But if you want something different and you want something that's solid and does not work or does not break and is got more moves than the 2K games, has a more coherent reversal system, people even sim matches on the game because you can make the logic of your character so realistic, like what kind of move they do at this time, when they do it, how they do it, how much they use it. That people will make just full leagues of simming matches and just see what happens. There's a rating system in the game. There's DLC. It's got New Japan Wrestling characters. It's got some of the guys from AEW, primarily Kenny Omega, because this came out a couple years ago and he was still there. There's DLC for more characters. There's DLC for like a matchmaker mode, which is like old school EWR. Basically, you get to kind of run your own promotion. And you got goals and things you want to achieve and try to get better matches and more people and stuff involved. There's a lot of fun stuff in that game. That's it. And the way the creation suite is, now look, it's 2D, and that might turn a lot of people off. 2D, it's got this like isometric camera view. Just go on YouTube, you'll find videos. But basically, the idea of that game is the way it's 2D, so it's really easy to make created parts for it because it's not super involved in terms of like the making of it for like the developers. So there's like a billion combinations on that game. Billions. And with this one, whether you get it on the PlayStation or the PC is a little easier to do this, but you can put your own characters in the game. Or not put your own, you can download other characters in the game. You can do it on both. It's just a website, but the Steam one's a little easier. But you can get any character you want from any wrestling league. Do you want 80s Macho Man fighting, I don't know, do you want him fighting like Bigfoot? Oh yeah, you can do that. Do you want, you know, Terry Funk to wrestle The Rock? Oh, of course. Yeah, you could do it. You could do anything. I mean, you can like, it's not just wrestling guys. There's a lot of crazy wrestlers. Like I said, there's like Bigfoot or bears or I saw a guy recently make his dog and it looks good. It looks accurate. That's what's even more amazing for it. It's a 2D game. This company has been around. They've done games for almost 30 years, I think now. Pretty much since the Super Nintendo. And they haven't made a wrestling game from the PS2 to when Fire Pro Wrestling World came out. That was Fire Pro Wrestling Returns, which you can still buy on the PS3, it's PS2 Classic. So you can play it on those two systems. And then there's the new one. The new one's better. It's got everything from the old ones. The music, though, is better on Returns. I am this huge mark for the Returns music to the point where I will think about it in my everyday life because it's just amazing. And you could do it. And that's what's fun about that game. And I want more people to know about it and play it. I know that, like I said, it's 2D. It's going to turn a lot of people off. But, dude, it's the best. The grappling system, the mechanics are simple, but very hard to be like the master. To be a Jedi master which I'm pretty sure you can download Jedi in this game. To be a Jedi Master of this gameplay system is not easy. Basically, the two guys, they just start to go into like a lockup, like their hands on each other. And as soon as they do that, you're supposed to. There's three different button combinations, not combinations, three different buttons you can press, and it's like weak, medium, and strong grapple. Basically, so there's a cat and mouse game of weak versus strong, strong versus middle, middle versus weak, and so on. And you could have I think 4 moves, I believe, or 5 moves to each button. So you can have this crazy amount of moves. You don't really have to repeat moves like in a lot of wrestling games. And you can do moves on the ground when they're standing. You get a finisher, but technically you don't have to have a finisher. That's the other cool thing is you can kind of mess around with the finishers and how that works. You can even have your guy never even be able to climb the top rope. Like you could just assign nothing to work for the top rope, so he can't even climb it. So if you have an Andre the Giant, he can't climb the ropes. You can do things like that. You can't do that in the WWE games. The guy's going to climb the top rope no matter what. There's some really cool things. These guys are dedicated, diehard wrestling fans. And that's what I want people to take out of this is, one, the 2K games aren't the only thing. It's just like normal wrestling. WWE is not the only game in town. There's Fire Pro Wrestling. There's even older versions of the 2K. It's just like when people complain about Madden. Go play the older version if you don't like the new one. And that's fine. That's fine. I'm not, that's no big deal. There's a bunch of wrestling games. There is, I think it's called Retromania Wrestling. It's an official sequel to WrestleFest. It's got a lot of indie guys, and I think it's got the Road Warriors in it. It's not out yet, but it's coming soon. There's even, I used to, friends with Dave from Pro Wrestling X. It's a kind of a small PC game. There's a lot of other little indie games, and there's Action Arcade Wrestling. That's an interesting game. That's something that I think with a little bit more honing could be a stellar game. It's still a decent game, but it could be a little bit better. It's actually through Chikara, the wrestling league, and I was on the beta test for that just a few months back, and that's a good game, and it's a solid game. It's over the top. It's like an arcade kind of game. It kind of reminds me a little bit of, I believe it was called, I think it was WrestleMania for the Nintendo. Like there's like power-ups on the screen, and so it's kind of like that. Even the camera angle is the side view of the ring. It's a lot like that, but it's fun. It's a good game. I want people to know that there's more than just one wrestling game out there. Heck, go play EWR, like I mentioned. It's not a wrestling game in the true sense. It's a text-based game with good layout menus and stuff, and it's just you can download any year of wrestling you want, and basically you run the league and you see if you can make money and make sure you don't go out of business, try to run your competitors out of business, have the highest rated TV show, make the most money, steal characters, wrestlers from other leagues. And like I said, you can download scenarios, as it's called, for any year of wrestling. You could be any promotion. You could be a backyard wrestling promotion and try to work your way to be the WWE. Then they had sequels to that. I think it was called Total Extreme Warfare. Get those. I think 2005 is free. Do that. There's a lot of wrestling games, and I want people to realize that, look, there's more than one game out there. And just because WWE is the big guy in town, yeah, they got the biggest budget, their games definitely look the best. There's a lot of other awesome games out there. So many. We might also have an AEW game soon. That's the kind of scuttlebutt that's been kind of flying around for a while. The reason why the 2K20 game has been kind of garbage, well, really is garbage, is that Yuke's, it's a Japanese developer who's made all the SmackDown games all the way up through 2K. They left this year. There's some weird things. Something happened behind the scenes, I feel. I don't think the full stories ever came out. There's some weird stuff. So they left, and Visual Concepts, who I believe made the MLB games for 2K back in the day, they had to do the full development of the game. And so they still had the engine from Yuke's, but they didn't know how to do everything. So that's where all these glitches are coming from. And there's a former developer from 2K who's saying, look, there might even be a 2K21, or the budget's going to be tremendously dropped because the sales of this game have been really bad, and so it might not even get fixed next year. So who knows what's going to happen with that. And Yuke's rumor is they're working on another wrestling game. That's been out in the news that they're doing some other wrestling game. Kind of in their leisure is what they made it sound like. It wasn't like they had a suitor that they were, hey, we're going to make this game. Okay, let's make this game. It sounded like they had an idea and they're just kind of messing around. Well, AEW's out there. Those guys, especially someone like Kenny Omega, who's in New Japan Fire Pro Wrestling, who loves fighting games. Some of the other guys have been known to play games a lot. Maybe that's where they're doing. And I think it's a good chance. I think they really are. They're working on an AEW video game. And how I would do it is basically just make an AEW video game with an open creation suite, make it play like No Mercy, of course. Or what I like more, Virtual Pro Wrestling 2, which No Mercy is kind of based off of. No Mercy's great. I love it. That and VPW 2 are almost identical. There's a few little things. There's an MMA system in Virtual Pro Wrestling. There's most of the moves I think are in it, but since it's the Japanese wrestlers, the Japanese moves are take more of a forefront than the American wrestling moves. And I love the way the Japanese wrestling style is and the way the moves look. They look more not necessarily realistic because there's definitely some weird moves, but they look more like they're meant to do damage. And with a lot of the Japanese, a lot of the wrestlers in AEW having a Japanese past or wrestle for them now, Mox, Jericho, they wrestle for them. I think that's something that could be done. And I think that's something that they could use, make it play like No Mercy, Virtual Pro Wrestling 2. It also had the like a fighting spirit one where like sometimes like if you'd run and do a German suplex, the dude would just get up and run at you and do like a running attack, knock you down, and then they'd both fall on the ground. It was really fun. It was an amazing system. So I think that's pipe dream. That's it. It's an AEW game with an open creation suite, so you can still make anybody you want, and it plays like Virtual Pro Wrestling 2 No Mercy. The first year or first game doesn't need all the crazy modes. It just needs a good single player tag match and some kind of story mode, and then make sure it's online play. And then they'll probably have some basic weapons, and then just kind of build on it from there. As long as it plays really solid, which is right now, that's what you need to do when you're competing against the 2K games, then it could catch on, and it could work. I mean, Fire Pro Wrestling got an actual physical PlayStation release. I mean, think about that. That's why I love this generation of games. Right now, this generation of games has had a very robust library. And not just digital titles. I'm just talking in general, like even physical titles. I haven't seen this since PS2. PS3 and 360 kind of really, like, AAA developers kind of cut back and kind of, not stranglehold of the market, but they kind of really didn't expand in terms of types of games. Well, now we're back to the PS2 era. We're like, you can still go back and play PS2 games. And you're like, holy crap, this was a real game. Like Katamari Damacy, like stuff like that. And we're seeing more and more different types of games. Even, like I said, in wrestling games. There are now 2 physically released wrestling games, 2K and Fire Pro. There's digital titles. There's other things too. So that's what's great. And the systems now are a little easier to work on, and that's a key. And I'm hoping that continues with the PS5 and the Xbox, whatever it's called, the computer tower looking Xbox. And I just want to see that, and that would help things like these games happening and other types of games. Look, someday I will go into detail about my idea for a drifting-based racing game. That's it. It'd just be drifting. Nothing else in that game. Different modes, all based off drifting, online play, you name it. All of that, but that's it. There's no like physical racing in the game per se, except maybe some Toge battles like Initial D style, down Mount Akina, that kind of stuff. Look, that could happen. And that's it. Like there's all these ideas just kind of swirl in my brain, and I'm going to time in and out of this show sometimes with just things are going on, and that's it. There's a lot of stuff, and I mean, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Just remember, I'm on Twitter, Instagram, at GeekySteveD. I'm on Snapchat as the same, and I'm on YouTube. I put up clips of this episode, the previous episode, and everything else. And I'm going to start making original content for that as well. This is all something that's been new to me. I'm kind of working on it. I'm trying to get there. Like anything you want, give me feedback, give me discussion. I want you guys to tell me what you think. Because, look, I'm not the only person out there. I know there's other people. You guys have opinions. You guys also have things we might want to talk about. Send me an email. I'll call you out on the show. Just send me something. GeekySteveD@gmail.com. You can always send me an email. Until tomorrow, guys. Take care. See ya.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.